Xi Jinping makes it official that he's gunning for the reserve currency status. He's going to take the Yuan to achieve the global reserve currency. And the way he announced it, though, was kind of strange. This is the first thing I kind of learned. It's behind closed doors, so you can't even see the speech or the article. The way that they found out, it was reporting on
very confidence inspiring.
It's one, yeah. You're a couple layers removed here. But have you heard of QiuShi? You can flash the characters on the screen. But it's like the Chinese Communist Party policy magazine. So it says, the article points out that a strong financial nation should be based on strong economic foundation, possessing world-leading economic strength, technological strength, and overall national strength, and simultaneously possessing a series of key core financial elements. First, it should have a strong currency, widely used in international trade and investment in foreign exchange markets, and possessing the status of the global reserve currency. That's when your eyebrows go up, by the way, Joe.
Yeah, I was.
Second, it should have a strong central bank capable of effectively conducting monetary policy regulation and macroprudential management. And it just goes on like this. There's a third, a fourth, a fifth. You know, we can send you a link if you want to read the thing. Super dry. These things, you can't help but have your eyes just glaze over because it's so incredibly high level. It's like, I don't understand. So is this what it means to be the chair of the Chinese, economic party, just to make a wish list of stuff that you want? It's like, well, I can do it one higher. I can just be like, I want a great country, make it happen. I'm the emperor. You know what I mean?
Pretty much.
Yeah. I mean, we like to focus on details here. We can't really do that. That's most we get is one level removed, I guess, from the primary source. But that's not really what I wanted to talk to you today about. It really was got me thinking, what does it mean to have a global reserve currency? What does that mean, Joe?
Reserve currency, international store of value, medium of exchange internationally, collateralization of trade and financial products.
Yep, you pretty much got. Yep, cross-border banking claims.
Those are the big ones
you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yep. The dollar is held as reserves. This could also be like treasuries. And just to throw a couple numbers at you, the USD accounts for about 58% of global foreign exchange reserves. So if you put all of the reserves of all the central banks around kind of the world and you stacked them up, 58% would be dollars. Now that has been coming down from its peak in 2001 at 72%. And the number two, the next highest, is the euro. The other thing, though, that's kind of interesting lately, that the proportion of reserves held at central banks, gold has been going up pretty sharply lately. I don't know if you noticed that, but that's kind of an interesting trend. But that's not what we're talking about. But, about 50% of the payments over SWIFT are USD. And that includes euro area payments. Does it really count if you have a payment between Germany and France that's in euros? I mean, they're already in the euro area. If you extract that, then the percent of payments over SWIFT that are USD is closer to 60%. Yeah, so cross-border banking claims, that'll be like if a bank in a country that uses currency A, but some of the deposits are going to be in currencies B, C, D, whatever. Now, right now, 60% of banking liabilities across national borders are denominated in a foreign currency are in the USD. So stuff like that. So then in 2008, sure enough, which seems to be the date that so many of these financial stories seem to hinge around, China discovered that it was far too reliant on the dollar. Okay, it was exposed. It had some risk there. And that's when it started to say, we're going to make the renminbi a little more international. They started to internationalize, is the word, the renminbi, the RMB. So how do you do that, Joe? I think you got to establish the infrastructure and you got to establish the demand. For the infrastructure part, first thing that they had to do was establish a network of really dedicated clearing banks that could do renminbi. And I think they have set up 31 designated offshore RMB clearing banks in 27 countries, stuff like that. Now, those are going to usually be subsidiaries of the Chinese banks. You need to set up an RMB cross-border international payment system. So that's another thing that the Chinese have done. They set up the CIPS, cross-border international payment system, that offers clearing and settlement across the border for RMB. Now, this is something that directly competes with SWIFT. The last thing I'll mention, they have RMB swap lines. So the swap lines, this is, I give you a loan in dollars and then you collateralize it with your local currency, for instance. That's kind of like a swap line. Talking recently in a episode not too long ago about the Argentine swap line. We gave them dollars, they gave us, Argentine pesos, and they were just recently paid it back. That's a swap line, and China has set up a couple of those. Now, the other half of that, if that's like the infrastructure part, then you also need to get the demand part. How do they actually get people to use this stuff? One way they can do it is with bilateral agreements. So this goes back to Brazil. China announced an agreement. Notably missing is the USD for trade settlement between the two countries. Trade financing and invoicing is another one, and that's one of the bigger ones. That's a major push. China has been seeing notable increases in the share of their trade that is done in RMB. So you can imagine when Xi Jinping, I don't know if he came up with this idea or if someone sold it to him, they could say, look, we need to leverage our trading relationships and our just economic might and have them use RMB to settle these transactions, not dollars. I think they're up to 30% of the international trade is done with in RMB. But the other natural part for the demand is the fact that investors need to want to hold them. That's a huge part. And this is probably where China is a bit weaker. The Federal Reserve, they will publish articles every once in a while along these topics. So I've kind of scoured that, and that's where I'm getting most of this stuff. But you'll see later that I think there are other parts that have been left out of the conversation that are worthwhile. Joe, what are some of the issues you would have with holding a bunch of RMB?
Capital controls. I think it kind of goes hand in hand with opaque financial markets. You don't have confidence that you're going to be able to get your money out whenever you need it. So that's like a huge structural issue. So like what's the limit?
Right.
Like it isn't like doesn't the Chinese government limit like citizens can only take out like 50,000 RMB per year out of the country or something
that
like
was
that?
the case. Yeah, that was the case when I was living there like 10 years ago. I don't know what it is now, but there were limits. Yeah, you couldn't take out more than a certain amount.
But that number, like talking about international trade or finance, that's basically zero. Like it's nothing.
The
And then
FX
also just like
fixing
the
is another
currency,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah, it's not a free floating currency. It's managed.
If it's not free floating, you can never be confident in the real value behind it effectively, because if you're actively managing it, you have some target that you want. And if the international economic cycle, trade, whatever, starts to move against you, things have to weaken sometimes. Things have to strengthen sometimes. The more you hold it, whenever people think it should be going one way, you slowly start to chip away at confidence. If you do that enough, then confidence is lost. Then then you're kind of the opposite of any kind of reliable store of value. So I think just fundamentally, if you're going to talk about anything even close to a global reserve currency, you have to have confidence that it's reflecting the value that the international financial system is actually putting on it, not what the Chinese central bank, therefore the Chinese government, is putting on it. We don't even know, like we can't even hear the speech from the president. We have to read about talking points from it through their party mouthpiece.
I think that makes sense. I don't think the renminbi is really anywhere close to a global currency. If you get nothing else from this, that's really the main, and people generally in agreement about that.
Now that doesn't mean that there's not a path to it, though.
Yeah, it's a very long path. So so that's a good transition to this next bit, which is the question: how did the U.S. dollar become the global currency, the global reserve currency?
Like any good historical events, there's a lot of different things that lead up to this. It didn't just happen one day. All of a sudden, okay, everyone thought internationally we're going to start using dollars. It was really, the historical turning point My point
I
is
might
that
have something
World
for
War
you, Jim.
II, 1945, Europe was pretty much destroyed. Europe had to be rebuilt. The U.S. was the economic powerhouse. The U.S. was lending, rebuilding Europe. The U.S. was rapidly advancing their international financial system. It was very open. It was very easy to do commerce in dollars. It was very accessible, and to our previous point, it was always a free floating currency. It's a big confluence of factors. It's not something that you can just kind of mandate into existence, I think is my point.
Okay. Well, let me introduce you. Have you read the book, The Battle of Bretton Woods? Having the US dollar become the global reserve currency, I could argue almost did happen overnight. It was a conscious decision. But Bretton Woods, that's a town northern in New Hampshire, just like a 3-hour drive north of where I am. The White Mountains, love it. I go hiking there. And to your point, after World War II, delegates from around the world came and set up the modern international financial system. So really the big thing that came out of Bretton Woods was the IMF and the World Bank. And a bunch of international delegates going around table, and they were debating sort of the articles, like how these institutions were to be run. And in the book, the author describes a particular battle between the British and the American. And the British were really headed by none other than John Maynard Keynes. That's right, Keynes himself. And on the US side, there was this guy, Harry Dexter White. So he's this guy from Treasury, some technocrat. And they were, debating, like I said, and establishing this new system. And White always wanted the US dollar to be the reserve currency, but he couldn't just put that in. It was too hot to put that in directly. So throughout these documents that were establishing all these institutions, the American used the phrase, quote unquote, gold convertible currency, which is kind of an unobjectionable filler, right? That no one would object to. So they were going through this, and once again, they would come up with this phrase, gold convertible currency. And then an Indian delegate asked everyone, what the hell is that? So the guy said, maybe I'll spare you my Indian accent, but he asked, I think it's high
No,
time.
please give it
No,
to us.
I think it is high time that the USA delegation give us a definition of gold and gold convertible exchange. There you go. Then it says, at that point, Dennis Robertson, the British delegate on the committee, apparently imagining that the issue was one of mere bookkeeping, suggested that, quote, I wonder if I can even do a British accent. It's tough because I was just listening to an audiobook written, speaking by a British guy. So I really should be able to do this. But since doing the Indian accent, I'm like totally thrown off. Dennis Robertson says, quote, payment of official gold subscriptions should be expressed as official holdings of gold and United States dollars. And then he complains that would require a bunch of word changes throughout the whole document. This other guy, Bernstein, concurred with Robertson that, quote, gold convertible exchange was hard to define, and getting a definition that would be satisfactory to everyone here would involve a long discussion, yada, yada, yada. But then he says, as a practical matter, since national monetary authorities could freely purchase gold for dollars in the United States, and international holdings of currencies that might be used to purchase dollars were small, quote, it might be easier for this purpose to regard the United States dollars as what was intended when we speak of gold convertible exchange, end quote. Then White, so that's the American delegation, must have had difficulty concealing his flush of excitement. With Keynes preoccupied managing the World Bank proceedings, Robertson had walked straight into White's trap. He now made his second critical maneuver. He ended the commission's discussion of the matter. Quote, unless there are any objections, we're going to go ahead and move on. And then there were no objections. And then basically throughout the night, he was working until 3:00 with the drafting committee and the fund, and he got it into a shape that he was happy with. Basically, among the achievements of the committee, composed entirely of White's technicians, strategically replacing, quote, gold with, quote, gold and US dollars throughout the 96-page final act. Yeah. White never submitted the changes for consideration in Commission 1. yet they would become an important part of the IMF Articles of Agreement. Keynes would only discover them after his departure from Bretton Woods. So he snuck it in there.
Really? Wow.
Past Keynes. I think Keynes was sick, I think, if I remember correctly, a lot during this time. He didn't really have his full 100% attention.
But this whole document was written with having gold in mind.
Yes.
As an international medium of exchange. Oh.
Yep. So one of the things we got to remember,
Wow.
so that's kind of how, just for a little bit of a history lesson, that's it, I think most people probably have, your understanding it. And to be sure, by that point, and even after World War I, the U.S. had taken a much larger step in the global economy. But in terms of becoming the reserve currency, that almost was a decision made by a bunch of people. So we got to keep that in mind when we think of what's going to happen to the yuan, right? And what are these international financial institutions that are being set up? Now, China, of course, is going to set up its own version of these institutions. So let's see what they did. So the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank is sort of the Chinese version of the World Bank. So that was established in 2015. It issues RMB denominated bonds called panda bonds to raise funds and provides, loans partially or fully in RMB. So I was like, okay, well, one would probably expect that if they really wanted the renminbi to be the global reserve currency, then I would wonder what this capital, like what did those articles of agreement, what are they denominated in, Joe? What do you think? When they set up that bank, the capital that they put in, according to the Articles of Agreement, is what currency?
I mean, naturally, it's got to be the renminbi.
Nope. It's the dollar, baby.
Or is it not?
Woo! Wow. Yeah, still there.
Didn't see that one coming. Wow. Interesting.
All right, say it with me. USA. USA.
Yeah, USA.
I mean, you gotta, it's not.
So why is
the, I mean, it's because it's not just China.
I mean,
it's not like they're trying to make an international and the dollar's just so dumb. Like what the renminbi couldn't do it. They don't have the piping. They don't have the support. It's not used anywhere. It has to be the dollar. You mentioned earlier the renminbi really is nowhere close, and I don't think they're even ready in terms of managing their own monetary system. This is another point. We touched upon this a while ago back in episode 39. So I won't go into detail, but it has to do with just their monetary policy right now is based upon what the trade balance is. And then they manage the currency in order to adjust it. So like they would have to adjust that. Like there's so many things that need to happen before they can even make a run for the reserve currency. Right? They got to set up the piping. You got to get rid of these capital controls. You got to, I think, change your own the philosophy of your monetary system. Get it off of that trade balance thing.
What do you think prompted that? Like, what's the motivation for Xi Jinping to say that now?
Jeez, obviously, I have no window into that guy's mind. I think the only thing, I mean,
given the world today.
At the highest level, China sees itself as the next United States. So whatever the U.S. has, China wants. And part of that is a global reserve currency. I honestly don't know if it's much more complicated than that.
Really?
China cannot eclipse the U.S. if it doesn't have all these things I listed, all those things they listed. Strong currency, widely used in international trade and investment in foreign exchange markets, possessing the status of the global reserve currency. Strong central bank, capable of effectively conducting monetary policy, macroprudential management, promptly and effectively preventing and resolving systemic risk. Third, it should have a strong financial institutions, on and on and on. I mean, it's just describing like a great country. The greatest country is not going to have the reserve currency. Give me a break. You're not there yet. You're not at the top spot if you don't have the reserve currency. I mean, reading these articles that get posted and what they want and stuff, that's what it feels like anyway.